Edwin Canestracci here. I'm back, yet again. I do that from time to time. I come back and do another video. For years, I've been talking about doing a Wings Macca-Rama video, aka a ranking video for the uninitiated. However, I decided since I made you all wait for so long, I decided to go full Macca. Yeah, that's right, full Macca. I'm doing every album after the Beatles. Yes, that's right. Every solo Paul McCartney album, and I'm including Wings. Yeah, I think most people think of Wings albums as Paul McCartney or Paul McCartney and Wings. The titles of those albums, sometimes they were Wings, sometimes they were Paul McCartney and Wings. Ram even is technically a duo album. Yes, that's a Paul and Linda McCartney album. But in the end of the day, we all think of him as Paul McCartney albums, obviously. All the subsequent compilations over the years, Wingspan and all that, usually mix the Wings stuff with the Paul McCartney stuff. So essentially, this is everything Paul McCartney did after he left the Beatles. Studio albums. Yes, I'm sticking to studio albums, so no live albums, and no electronica side projects, no classical music side projects, no live and studio albums that came out like 30-something years later. Nothing like that. I just want to keep it simple studio albums that were all released relatively close to when they were recorded. And after doing the math and figuring out what all these albums were, I came to the number 26. Yeah, 26 albums. So I'm going to rank 26 studio albums from Sir Paul McCartney. This is not an objective list. It's a highly subjective list, although I think like maybe my top 3 or 4 are both objective and subjective. But there are some choices I'm going to make that are going to mess with your mind probably. If you're really diehard Macca fans and love everything he did, you're going to hate me towards the beginning of this video while I'm doing my least favorite albums of his, because I'm not a fan of these albums. I think Paul McCartney has a couple clunkers in his career, and I'm going to be honest about it. That being said, I am a huge, massive Paul McCartney fan, and not just because of the Beatles. I am a very big Wings fan. I love a lot of his solo albums. Some of these albums, actually, every album that's in my top 10, I would rank above Sgt. Pepper. So there. Yeah, that's how much of a Paul McCartney fan I am. Of course, some of you might know, I greatly undervalue Sgt. Pepper. I'm always taking shots at it because it's my least favorite, or, second or third to least favorite, depending on my mood, Beatles album. Not a huge fan of that album, but I do recognize its greatness objectively. So that just gives you some context, all right? So that gives you kind of context who Edwin is. And my favorite John Lennon solo album is Walls and Bridges. Okay, so put that on to the computer. Easily, Paul McCartney's my favorite solo Beatle. In the Beatles, him and John are competitive. If anything, I might give John the edge. I think I might love more John songs than Paul songs. Although my favorite Beatles song is a Paul McCartney joint, You Never Give Me Your Money. So there you go. You Never Give Me Your Money is my favorite Beatles song of all time. Although my top 10 is pretty much filled up with primarily John Lennon songs from the White Album. That is my favorite Beatles album of all time. And I don't know if Paul McCartney ever matched John Lennon's songs on the White Album. That being said, I prefer Paul McCartney's solo career. But how do I rank his albums against each other? It's only Macca against Macca here. It's the ultimate Macca throwdown. And since I got to do 26 albums, I'm just going to get into it. I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible since there's so many albums to cover. Obviously, as I get to my favorite albums, I will probably have more to say, knowing me. But I'm going to try to get through the shitty albums fast. Okay, so let's get to the shitty albums. Because even a genius like Paul McCartney can sometimes make shitty albums, especially if you live well into your 80s. Although, most of his shitty albums he didn't do in his 80s. Oh, spoiler alert. Let's just get to it. I don't want to spoil this list. So scratch that. Strike that from the jury. Here we go. Bottom of the Macca barrel. All right, my least favorite Paul McCartney album. I don't even own this album, and I never listened to it in its entirety. But I listened to it enough to know it was my least favorite. And that is Kisses on the Bottom. Fitting, Kisses on the Bottom's at the bottom. Yeah, okay, some might say, hey, that's unfair. That's unfair, Edwin. That's not even like a real album. Yes, it is. It's a real album. It was recorded in the studio. All right. It's a studio album. It is a cover album. It's a cover album of Paul McCartney singing traditional old school granny songs, which we all know Paul loves, and he's done his own kind of granny songs as a tribute to songs like this. And I'm not really into this kind of music. I'm not really into those songs. I'm not into the songs he picked. Listen, Macca, especially at this point in his career with his voice, I don't think he could deliver the performance that would have been necessary to elevate this material. It's nice that he did it. I'm glad he loves these songs. I don't ever need to listen to it. As far as bottom of the barrel albums, it's not offensive, but it's definitely my least favorite. Number 25. Now, this is the first real album, like an album of McCartney written songs. Yeah, Paul McCartney, one of the greatest songwriters of all time, wrote an album entirely of original material, and there's not a single good song on it. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing that he pulled this off, considering his talent. But anyway, at number 25 is Off the Ground. I don't own this album either. And I've sampled it several times in my life. In fact, the very first stadium show I ever saw in junior high was on this tour. Yeah, Paul McCartney on tour for Off the Ground. Great tour, great concert. But I remember when the two singles that came out from this, Hope of Deliverance and Biker Like an Icon. I can't even say that without laughing or grimacing in disgust. Yeah, worst song he ever wrote. It doesn't even rhyme. Biker, Icon. Macca, you forgot how to rhyme? Anyway, horrible album. Dated, lifeless, slick, late 80s sounding production, even though it's the mid 90s for some reason. And not a good song. Yeah, every song's really hokey, hippy dippy. It's a real throwaway, hey, let's just knock out an album and go on tour kind of album. Not a fan, not a fan. Sorry if you love it, but not for me. Number 24. I can't believe that number 24 is not my least favorite Paul McCartney album, because it should be, because it also sucks. And that is Give My Regards to Broad Street. Okay, some of you younger fans might not even know about this album because Paul McCartney probably doesn't want you to know about it because it's an abomination. Yes, it's an abomination. Why is this album an abomination? Well, imagine this scenario. Imagine if a middle-aged Paul McCartney re-recorded with an old George Martin, re-recorded many of his classic Beatles songs. And when they did it, they produced the songs to have a thin, dated, sterile, mid-80s production. Now, tell me, do you like the sound of that album in your head? Well, if so, then Give My Regards to Broad Street is the album for you, because it's exactly that album. This was for a movie, a pretty shitty movie as well, that he made in 1984. He does covers, his covers of his own songs. He re-records the Beatles songs, Eleanor Rigby, Yesterday, For No One, Here, There, and Everywhere. All amazing songs, obviously. Also re-records some of his solo songs. What's really confounding is they re-record two songs from Tug of War, Wanderlust and Ballroom Dancing, even though that album was just recorded 2 years prior. Just 2 years prior. And with the same producer. It was George Martin. And yet, they felt the need to re-record the songs, maybe to make it more similar sonically. But in my opinion, if you're putting your songs up against the Tug of War 1982 production and they don't sound like they flow, well, the problem is not with the Tug of War production. The problem is with this shitty 1984 album that you're re-recording. All right? That's the problem. That's where you should say, hey, why doesn't this sound as good as 2 years ago? But of course, this was a thing that was happening collectively around the world. It was mass spread. Suddenly, productions all started to suck in the mid-80s. I don't know why. If you do, explain in the comment sections below. But anyway, yeah, even the Tug of War covers sound greatly inferior to what they had done, him and George Martin, just 2 years prior. Oh God, this album's horrible. It's horrible. Even the single, the new song from the album, No More Lonely Nights, I know that was like a hit in the UK and people like that song, but I think that song sucks too. Yeah, not a fan. I would say this mid-80s is probably his weakest period overall. However, I still have to put it above the other two albums because even if these are greatly inferior productions and Paul's singing is not what it was back then, or even back in 1982, back in time to 1982, before 1984, where suddenly everything started to suck. But that all aside, I mean, these are great songs. I mean, yeah, they're really great songs. So if I had to make a choice, yeah, I would still rather listen to this album than Off the Ground or the Kisses on the Bottom record. So there you go, a very unenthusiastic number 24. Give my regards to Broad Street, but don't give my regards to this shitty album. Number 23. All right, this is an album that is notoriously considered one of his worst. And obviously, I have it ranked pretty low, so I guess I agree with people. And that is Press to Play. Remember what I was saying about the mid-'80s being McCartney's weakest period and how all the production sucks in the mid-'80s? Well, most of it. There were some cool underground records, but most of the productions sucked at that period. And yes, Press to Play is probably the worst culprit in regards of the horror show that is this production. It's just an ugly sounding album. It sounds like fucking Casio rock on a fucking lame ass Carnival cruise ship in I don't know, what is this, 86? 1986? It has an 86 sound. Yes, I was correct, 1986. I know a shitty 1986 production when I hear it. You know what makes a 1986 production even shittier than a 1984 or 85 production is, by this point, they're really comfortable in the shittiness of these productions. So, like, they're stretching it. They're going to new shitty frontiers that they wouldn't have dared gone just a year or two prior. Like, to everyone's collective ears, this sounded like good music. I give it an edge to give my regards to Broad Street because, A, they're not dragging great songs, great solo McCartney and Beatles songs through the mud. It's original material, and some of the songs are good. Actually, I listen to this and think, gee, if some of these songs had a better production, they wouldn't be so bad. Footprints is a lovely song. I really love that song. And, you know, he's trying different things. He's experimenting. It doesn't have the warmth and quirky character that his experimentations had on, say, McCartney 2. But I can tell that he's experimenting. He's trying different things. Most of the things he tries do not work. There's a lot of clunkers on this album. But again, songs like Footprints, I really like a lot. And I do listen to this album from time to time. And I own it. From this point on, I own all these albums. All right? So by no means would I say I like this album. And I don't think it's good enough to say it's underrated. But I do think it's not quite as bad as people say. But then again, not that great. Moving on. Well, this album, he recorded right after the last album. Some of you might not consider this a real album, but fuck it. Wikipedia does, so I'm going to consider it a real album too. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. If I have any Russian friends, please correct me. Choba B CCCP. So what the hell is going on with this album title? Okay, well, I'll explain that in a second. But essentially, this is another covers album, but this album is covers of old 1950s rock and roll songs. Obviously, that is closer to the style of music that I think Paul McCartney is better at singing and performing than those old standard granny songs that he did on that Kiss Me on My Ass album. So, you know, it's Paul McCartney doing some rock and roll songs. He went into the studio after, like, everyone hated Press to Play. I think he wanted to, like, go back to his roots and show people he can rock and roll again. But at the same time, he got this offbeat idea. And you gotta love McCartney. I love when he gets a little idiosyncratic like this. His idea was this album would be recorded and marketed for Russia, and it would be sold in Russia, and then only bootlegs of it would then be sold in the UK and other marketplaces. So he wanted it to look like a Russian bootleg, you know, playing up the whole back in the USSR thing. And his label did not like this idea. They pushed back, and then McCartney decided to fuck it. But he then discovered that they had already pressed a bunch of album covers, a lot of album sleeves with that title, with this Russian title. And then McCartney was like, well, since we got these recordings, we recorded these songs. I knocked them out, a bunch of session players in a couple days in the studio. We got the sleeves. How about we just release this in Russia? Why not, you know? So maybe McCartney played his role in the fall of the Soviet Union with this album. Not because it's bad, mind you, but maybe because to many Russians, this sounded like, hey, rock and roll that they weren't used to, and it got them excited, and they decided to tear down the wall because of this album. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. Obviously, I did not rank this too high because it sounds like Macca's going through the motions. It's not bad by any means, and the songs are all like classics. I think there's a little too many classics. It's like the song selection's a little boring, a little unimaginative, and for the most part, it just doesn't really have a lot of energy and life to it. It's not bad by any means. It's McCartney doing some rock and roll songs, but again, it does have that kind of shitty late 80s production. And like a decade later, he would do an album very similar to this, and it was much, much, much better. So much better that I'm not going to be talking about it for a while. All right, so that should give you an idea. So that gives you a little spoiler. Anyway, but yeah, Chaba Waba, whatever this album's called, unless you're a real completist, you can skip it. Okay, number 21. Now we're getting to albums that I think are kind of decent. In fact, I think this album is better than I'm giving it credit for. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I objectively hear an album and go, hey, that's better than I'm giving it credit for. But I can't help just not liking the album as much as I should. And that is, at number 21, Memory Almost Full. Memory Almost Full. This is an album, a later period album that he did sometime in like the mid-O's. I don't know. I don't want to bother looking at the date, but sometime in the mid-O's. And I would describe this as an experimental psychedelic pop album. Yeah, it's like a psychedelic pop album. He's stretching himself, doing a lot of cool things. There's some really great tracks, like House of Wax is a great song. Mr. Bellany or Belvedere or whatever that song's called. I like that song. That Was Me is a good track. There's, some good shit on it. And it's a pretty solid album. I'll just tell you right now, I think every album from Flaming Pie on is a solid album. Like McCartney got into a good solid groove from that album on. And this album does not really disrupt that consistency. And I'm not counting that Kisses on My Ass album. That's almost a side project as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, in terms of the real McCartney studio albums with original material, this fits in. This fits in with the consistency and the quality of his albums from this latter phase of McCartney, which for the most part, I'm a big fan of. So what's my deal with this album? Why did I rank it so low if it's so solid and it has a couple great songs? Well, I don't know. For some reason, I just don't go back to it. I did re-listen to it before doing this video, and I still had the same feeling. It's just something about this album that ultimately leaves me a little cold. It's just something kind of imperceptible. There's just something about it. I think it might be a little too twee for me, which is also my issue I have with Sgt. Pepper. This is definitely a little more the Sgt. Pepper side of Paul. There's little strings and he sings in a real Britishy voice. I don't mind that in spots, like a little bit here and there, like on an album like Ram. But I don't know, overall, maybe just a little too twee and a little too English, even for a semi-Anglophile like myself. And I don't listen to it that much, but not a bad album. Maybe it'll grow on me. Although it's been a while now. I feel like if it was going to grow on me, it would have done it by now. This next album did grow on me. And now we're getting into the top 20. Yeah, and this album that I'm talking about at 20 is Pipes of Peace. Pipes of Peace. I used to hate this album. Yeah, I would have put this probably a little more towards the bottom just like a year ago. For years, I hated this album. I only had it in my iTunes just because of Say, Say, Say. Yeah, I love Say, Say, Say. It was the first Paul McCartney song I ever heard. And not only do I have nostalgic feelings for that song, it's just a great song. It's just a great pop song. It's one of the great 80s pop songs, in my opinion. I love hearing Macca and Michael broing down, even though I know that Michael would screw over and betray Macca just a year or two later when he bought the Beatles catalog. That son of a bitch. Still, guy had a nice voice. I'll admit it. But so does Macca. Macca's got a good voice too. Hey, not too many white people, not too many white cats could be singing with the likes of Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson and hold their own. But Macca does it. That's what makes him awesome. Anyway, yeah, I thought it was kind of a slight pop throwaway album. It's not quite full-fledged mid-80s shitty production, but you can definitely hear already a significant drop-off, not just in song quality, but in production quality from Tug of War to this album, even though, once again, it's George Martin producing it. But some of these songs did come from the Tug of War sessions, and they tend to be the best songs on the album, with the addition of the Michael Jackson songs, Say, 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 and The Man, which I like. Keep Undercover Love that song. I think that's a great song. Average Person, I really like that song too. They have a nice, like, early 80s kind of ska vibe and with the rolling piano and the fast pace, a little like the stuff like Madness was doing in the early 80s. But Paul McCartney was doing shit like that back with Obla Dee, Obla Da in 1968. So if anyone should jump on that early 80s British ska trend, it should be Macca himself. Yeah. And they're good. I like it. There are some clunkers. I'm not really a big fan of the title track. It's a little too hippy-dippy hokey for me. Although I do like the mashup with Tug of War that happens towards the end of the album, which is very ahead of its time. There's some cool McCartney 2 kind of experimental leanings, and not so bad, not so bad. It's grown on me. Definitely inferior to Tug of War, there's no doubt about it. But better than a couple of the albums he would record afterwards. So overall, not so bad, Pipes of Peace. Not so bad. But still, definitely not one of your better albums. Number 19, first Paul McCartney and Wings album to be on this list, and that is Red Rose Speedway. I do like this album, but I don't love it. Yeah, now we're getting into albums I like. It starts off strong. Love the first half. Big Barn Red is a banger. Great rock song, great opening track. Love that. I admit I was never a big fan of My Love. To me, that's a little bit like lesser Billy Joel. And if it's one thing Paul McCartney should never sound like is lesser Billy Joel. It's Billy Joel's job to sound like lesser Paul McCartney. But I love that Little Lamb song, that Little Lamb Dragonfly song. Only Paul McCartney could sing a song about loving a little lamb, and it doesn't come off as hokey or even pervy. No, you're just like, yeah, that's beautiful. It's beautiful, you little lamb. I suspect that's a song that was recorded during the Ram sessions, has that vibe, has that pastoral splendor. Love that track. That's one of my favorite tracks on the album. Also love One More Kiss. A little gem of a song, really underrated. Something that could have fit on a Beatles album or Band on the Run, which would be the album they recorded right after this, the same year. So obviously a productive period for Macca. Problem with this album, it's the second side. There's a real major drop off in the second side. Some of these songs, like When the Night, that's like beneath McCartney standards, in my opinion. Loop is a kind of weird, semi-racist instrumental song that I don't care for. But the worst offender is the medley. The end medley here is horrible. It's a really bad medley. Hey, Macca, you helped mastermind and co-wrote one of the greatest medleys of all time. Yes, the Ending Abbey Road medley. Just don't go there. Don't invite the comparison, okay? Especially when the material you're bringing is like Hold Me Tight, Lazy Dynamite, Hands of Love, Power Cut. Oh, Lazy Dynamite is especially bad. More like Lazy Songwriter. Yeah, this is horrible. This stuff is really beneath McCartney's standards. And I'm surprised people do not pick this apart more. People seem to really like this album. I really think it's just because of the first half. First half is strong, but that second half and that medley really brings this down. But because of this strong first half, yeah, I still would put it above all those other albums that are behind it. Very similar story with the next album, number 18, Back to the Egg. This was the last album that was credited as Paul McCartney and Wings. It had the third lineup, the third Wings lineup. It was a real revolving door in Wings, which is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people don't really think of it as a real band, but more or less as a Paul McCartney solo project after the Beatles. However, Danny Lane of the Moody Blues and Linda, yes, Linda McCartney, were constant members. So you always had the trio there. You always had the trio of Paul, Danny, and Linda. So there was some consistency there. And in the mid-70s, it was clear that Paul was really trying to make this a band, which is to his credit. He was really trying. But we'll get into that when we get to some of those more band-oriented albums. So this album was recorded for a bunch of new guys that he thought this was going to be the Wings probably going into the 80s. That didn't happen. He decided to span the whole Wings idea after this album failed to be successful and after he got thrown into a Japanese jail cell for a week. So this album, just like the last one, Red Rose Speedway, it starts off very strong. That first track, the funky instrumental in the beginning, Reception, it's so genuinely funky. The very first time I put on this CD, I thought I had the wrong CD. I thought, like, what is this? The Commodore's Greatest Hits? Is there a Commodore CD here? And I looked and I was like, no, this is Paul McCartney and Wings. Or just Wings. I think this one was just Wings. Anyway, really funky stuff. Getting Closer, a fun rockin' song. I should mention that this whole album is kind of an attempt to not so much go back to the roots, which the album title, which I think is a horrible album title, and part of the reason why this album didn't do so well. Yeah, I'm blaming the album title, Back to the Egg. Originally, it was going to be called We're Open Tonight, which not only makes more sense with the album cover, but I think would have been a better title. And it's actually a running theme throughout. So I don't know. This last minute decision to call it Back to the Egg, I think was a dumb decision. I guess he was saying that this was a new birth with a new sound. Like it's a new modern rock sound. And it sounds like he's somewhat inspired by new wave and punk and funk and disco. And it's kind of like his Some Girls in some ways. Definitely not as successful and as strong as that album is, in my opinion. That's one of the best Rolling Stones albums. A rare case where the Rolling Stones were trendy and it worked really well for them. And Paul McCartney, who's really good at jumping on trends, is maybe not as successful, especially in the latter half. But it starts off strong. Love Spin It On. That's a good rocking kind of punk rock song, really fast and heavy. Great vocals from Paul. I always loved when he did that over the top Little Richard, like Screaming Jay Hawkins voice. I love that voice, and he does it a lot throughout this album. Again and again and again. The best Denny Lane song ever on a Wings album, maybe on any album. It's a great song. Could have been a single. Good on you, Denny Lane. Love that song. Old Siam Sir. Old Siam Sir. Full out heavy metal song. Yeah, it's a full out heavy metal song. Could be something like Rainbow or 70s Judas Priest did. It's like that heavy. And Paul sings his balls off. It sounds great. Love it. Arrow Through Me. Total tone shift. And this is one thing I love about Paul McCartney, how eclectic he is, because I myself have very eclectic taste in music. I jump from funk and heavy metal quite often. So the fact that Paul McCartney does this all in one album really works with my taste in music. And I love Arrow Through Me. Should have been a much bigger hit. A great, sly, funky song, worthy of Michael Jackson or Stevie Wonder. And he's not even singing with them on this one. It's just all Macca. It's awesome. One of his best songs, in my opinion. But then the second side, yeah, we got a drop off again. I like the snappy little new wave rock song To You. I like that track. But after that, oh no, it sounds like a medley again. We got After the Ball, which is like this kind of attempt to do like a Ray Charles sounding soul song, which I don't think really works. And then Winter Rose, Love Awake, which is this like kind of hokey new age sounding song that sounds like it should be left in a candle shop. Don't like it. And then, we got Reprise, So Glad to See You Here, which is kind of all right. But by this point, I'm already checked out. And then it ends with Baby's Request, which is a horrible song. And he even re-recorded it for that album, Asses on the Bottom, that I put on the bottom of this list. And it's just like, God, I didn't even like this song the first time around. And you're re-recording it? Horrible. One of his worst granny songs. So, unfortunately, it's the second half of the album that really brings down Back to the Egg. Otherwise, I would say it's an underrated album. And if you're a fan of eclectic music, rock and funk and new wave and punk and disco and anything you can think of, then definitely give this album a listen. I do really like it a lot, despite never wanting to listen to the second half. Number 17, An Anomaly. A album from the late 80s from Paul McCartney that is not horrible or mediocre at best. It's actually semi-good. And that is Flowers in the Dirt from 1989. Flowers in the Dirt. Yes, who would think that the album between Press to Play and Off the Ground would actually be kind of decent? Well, he pulled it off with the help of Elvis Costello on a couple tracks. But even the non-Elvis Costello tracks are still pretty strong, especially again, the first half. This is another album where I really like the first half, but I think it dips in the second half. But the first half is very strong. My Brave Face, that's a classic. That sounds like a classic. It sounds like it could be on like Rubber Soul or Help. Love that song. So catchy, melodic, very strong opening. I even like his little 80s pop number, Rough Ride. That's a decent song. Love Distractions, a beautiful, mellow, jazzy, bossa nova kind of lounge song. Now, this is the kind of granny music I like, and he does it with a lot of sensuality. Love it. We Got Married, my favorite song on the album. One of his best 80s songs. Has awesome guitar work from David Gilmour. very powerful, passionate song about his love with Linda and the life that they've made together. And without it sounding hackneyed or hokey, as some of those, hey, I love my wife and I love this person kind of songs do sometimes sound from Paul and John Lennon as well. But not this one. We Got Married has almost even kind of an undercurrent of darkness to it. It's a really interesting, meaty song and a great hidden gem on this, pretty decent album. Also love Put It There. Really great, folky little Paul McCartney loves doing stuff with his son song. Again, could be really hokey if handled wrong, but McCartney handles it right here. There's real deftness to the melody and how he plays it. This is definitely the guy that wrote Blackbird and Bluebird and some other birds maybe. Anyway, it's great. Love it. And Figure of Eight, which opens side 2, is also a really strong rockin' and soulful kind of song. Almost sounds like a slightly hard rock version of a Stax soul song from the 60s. Really love that song. But then after that, there's some hippy dippy stuff. There's some shitty Carnival Casino reggae sounding song. Another attempt at soul that I don't think is as effective. And it kind of putters out. And that is why I ranked it where I ranked it. But, every time I listen to Flowers to the Dirt, I always perk up and go, hey, this is one of his stronger albums. But then by the end, I'm like, is it still on? Is it still playing? What happened to you, Flowers in the Dirt? But anyway, not bad. Not a bad album. Number 16 is an album that is good. Now we're getting to good albums. Not just pretty decent, but good albums. In fact, there's only a couple tracks to bring this album down. Egypt Station. I was very excited about this album when it first came out. I listened to it quite a bit. I was all about it. And I still do listen to it from time to time. A lot of strong tracks on it. Who Cares? Good snotty rocker. Sounds like something that could have been on Back to the Egg. Overall, this sounds a little more like a Paul McCartney and Wings album. I think more so than any Paul McCartney post-Wings album. This really kind of has the vibe of a mid to late 70s Wings album, which I like. Love Confidant, a beautiful ballad. Hand in Hand's another really beautiful ballad. My favorite song's Dominoes. That's a really great, catchy, mid-tempo acoustic pop rock song. Really, really catchy. Love that song. And it's very eclectic. You got different styles. Even like the Back in Brazil song. Caesar Rock's great. Love the last track, which is both funky and hard rocking and kind of experimental. Hunt You Down, Naked, Sea-Link. Kind of a medley, I guess, but this medley is actually good. Dig all that. It's a really strong album. And yeah, I would say Dominoes is one of my favorite Paul McCartney songs of the past 20 years. So why is it like a mid-tier album for me? Well, I say it's a mid-tier album because it has maybe the worst Paul McCartney song ever on it, which is this attempt to do a very modern-sounding pop song, For You. Yeah, it's called For You. So they're doing a play on Fuck You, but instead he's saying For You. Oh, it's horrible. It's stupid. And it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. Why is this on this otherwise really good album? I don't know what this, horrible. Macca, why? And in addition to that really bad song, there's these two hippy dippy, Paul's trying to save the world kind of songs. People Want Peace. And despite repeated warnings, that's pretty bad. Even the title sounds really bad. Despite repeated warnings, hey, I'm all for trying to save the environment, but maybe with a less heavy-handed approach, Macca, all right? Be a little subtle with your lyrics. I know you're the guy that wrote Give Ireland Back to the Irish, so you're not always so subtle, but at least that song rocked. This song sucks. Yeah, so this song sucks. People Want Peace kind of sucks, and For You really sucks. So because of that, because there's 3 tracks that I don't like, that brings this otherwise really good, bordering on great album down. But still, I listen to it. I still listen to this album. I just skipped those tracks. 15. Wings at the Speed of Sound. Now, that's a title. I like the title. It's a bold title. And it lets you know that this is indeed a Wings album. In fact, this might be the wingsiest of all the Wings albums. And this is something that people don't like about this album. But hey, I might have a contrary opinion. People don't like the fact that this is the album where he actually lets the other members of Wings write and sing songs. Some people are like, hey, you're Paul McCartney. Why do you have these second-rate talents on your album singing and writing songs? Well, maybe compared to Paul McCartney, they might be second-rate. But I don't really think they're second-rate overall. In fact, I think these guys are pretty talented. Jimmy McCulloch was a very talented, he was the second lead guitarist in Wings and the lead guitarist during this and Venus and Mars. Very talented lead guitarist and a decent songwriter and singer, as you'll hear when we also get to Venus and Mars. I really like his track, Wino Junko. I think that's a cool little mid-70s kind of soulful, soft rock song. Very much like something that could have fit on a Fleetwood Mac or Eagles record from that time period. And I dig it. I love that kind of music. I love that mid-70s California soft rock sound. And this album has it in spades. In fact, I think Paul McCartney was a big influence on that sound. And we'll get more into that later. But that's a good one. There's a song, this nice little ballad that Paul McCartney wrote for Joe English to sing. Joe English, who was the drummer in Wings during this period. And ironically, the only guy in the band that was from America and not the UK, but his name was English. So Paul thought, hey, close enough, you can join Wings. And he has a nice voice. That's like such a mid-70s thing to have a drummer sing a ballad with a surprisingly nice voice. You don't get that in any other decade. But yeah, that song, Must Do Something About It. Really lovely song. I really like that song. And I even like Cook of the House. So there, In Your Face, a fun little novelty song. Yeah, it would have been better if Ringo was singing it. But he was not in Wings. Linda was, and it makes sense. And she's like the lady. She's the cook of the house. It's a fun song. It's actually well suited for her style of singing. And I like it. In fact, the only two songs I don't like are Paul McCartney songs. Yeah, and they are two songs that bring this album down. Warm and Beautiful, which is a real limp ballad, that brings it down a bit. And She's My Baby, one of the worst songs that Paul McCartney ever wrote. Real hokey, try hard, funk songs, really stupid lyrics. Not a fan. That being said, Paul McCartney does have some of his finest songs he ever wrote. There's Let Him In, a classic. I always love that song. Such an idiosyncratic, interesting pop song. Love it. Worthy of the Beatles, in my opinion. Let Him In, a classic. He wrote the great song, The Note You Never Wrote, which Denny Lane sings, does a great job singing it. But McCartney wrote it. A great atmospheric, haunting pop rock song, almost vaguely psychedelic. It's an amazing song. It always pulls me in and captivates me. Beware My Love, my favorite song on the album. Epic McCartney track. Yeah, this is like a disco-tinged hard rocker. It's really hard rocking for the most part, and Paul's doing his whole screaming his head off voice. I love it. But there is kind of a little underlying of a disco groove to it, just like you have on Silly Love Songs, which is also on this album, and also a really idiosyncratic, interesting postmodern pop song, which I used to not like as a teenager, but I've grown to like over the years. Love all that. Danny Lane also wrote and sings another song, which I really love, Time to Hide. Time to Hide, another song that could have fit right on a Fleetwood Mac album. Real nice groove to it. It was a real credit to Paul McCartney that he was allowing his bandmates to shine. He really wanted this to be like a group. And on this album and with the one prior to it, they almost were becoming like a real band. Almost. And then it all fell to shit with the next album, unfortunately. Although, if you noticed, I didn't rank that album yet. So it looks like I got a higher opinion of it than this album. Really, it's only because of those two bum tracks, Warm and Beautiful and She's My Baby, that this album's not even higher. It's a really strong and eclectic mid-70s rock album. I'm a fan of it, and you should be too. Number 14, Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. People love this album. Critics lost their minds over it, and a lot of Macca fans think it's one of his best albums. Obviously, I like it, but I'm not quite as enraptured by it as a lot of Macca fans. Although maybe I should be. This is another one that I feel like I should like more. And sometimes I do. When it first came out, I loved it. And there have been periods in my life where I have loved this album very deeply. It kind of depends on my mood and where I'm at in my life. It's that kind of album. It's definitely the darkest album Paul McCartney ever recorded. And I think sometimes if things are melancholy and dark, a lot of time critics and music fans seem to perceive that as having more depth. And sometimes that's the case, but not always. And I do think there is a lot of depth to this album. He was still a few years after dealing with Linda's passing, and George Harrison had just passed, so he was kind of in a gloomy state. I think a lot of people would probably credit a lot of the sound and atmosphere of this album to producer Nigel Godwick, who produced a lot of Radiohead and Beck albums around this time period. And no doubt he definitely helped McCartney to kind of focus on that side. But I will argue when we discuss another album, the album right before this, Driving Rain, that McCartney was already on his own moving in this kind of darker, more introspective direction. This sounds like a natural progression from that album, and that had a different producer. So there you go. So it's not all about the producer. McCartney produced or co-produced most of the albums in his career. He himself is a great producer, and I'm going to get more into that when we get into the top 10. But he also played a lot of instruments on this album, not so much that it counts as a DIY McCartney album, so it doesn't fit into the McCartney trilogy, but it's close. It's probably like a little bit adjacent to those albums. But this was recorded in the studio and with a co-producer, and they did bring in other musicians, especially for like string arrangements and horns and stuff like that. But overall, this is a beautiful album. Like, there's not anything bad on it. There's not one bad song. In fact, from this point on, we're now getting to albums where I don't think there's any bad songs. So that's pretty impressive that McCartney has 14 albums where I don't think there's a bad track. Yeah, I don't skip any song when I listen to Chaos and Creation in the Backyard or any of the albums I put above it. All the songs are really good, masterfully crafted and performed and sung. It's a real class act album. I could see why people love it and why critics love it. But I think it lacks the eclecticism that I usually like from a Paul McCartney album and a little of the fun. Like, hey, it's good to get a little gloomy sometimes, but let's have some fun. You do have the opening track, Fine Line, which is my favorite track on the album and the one that feels most purely McCartney. But I feel like this is McCartney being a little more self-conscious, a little more serious, and kind of just going in one direction, which is unusual for him. It's a great direction, and all the songs are really good. I mean, don't get me wrong. Friends to Go, I really love that song. Riding to Vanity Fair, it's great. How Kind of You is a cool, trippy, psychedelic, dark love song. But it is one note. It is kind of a one-note album. Great on like a rainy day, a gloomy rainy day, and great if you feel like being in a melancholic kind of mood. And it shows that McCartney did have these different sides. He could do an album like this, which I think a lot of people thought he couldn't. So there, he did the one dark, melancholic, moody album that's dark and melancholic and moody for the most part throughout the majority of the album. And if the mood hits me, I still do listen to it, and I do like it quite a bit. So a pretty strong number 14. Now, number 13. This is the album I was just talking about. Driving Rain. Driving Rain is an album that did get some acclaim at the time, and a lot of people did like it. But I've noticed that it's kind of a forgotten album. People don't talk about it as much as they do Flaming Pie or Chaos and Creation. It's just something I've noticed. But I think it's a very significant album in between those studio statements. And it does show the dark, moody side that is throughout Chaos and Creation. This is the first album of original songs that he did after Linda's passing and getting involved with another woman and contemplating his life and aging and death. And it's all throughout this album. However, where I think it betters Chaos and Creation is it is more eclectic, and it does have that other side of McCartney as well, namely the rock and roll side. I guess that's another issue I have with Chaos and Creation. And again, a really good album, but there's not that much rock and roll on it. With the exception of Fine Line, it's a pretty mellow and tame album for the most part. Whereas Driving Rain is still a rock and roll album, but with moody experimental moments. Really good production by David Kahn. He's a lesser known producer than that Nigel guy, and he encouraged McCartney to do a lot of different things. Lonely Road, great rock and roll song, a great restless, emotional rock and roll song. I love it. From a Lover to a Friend. Oh man, that song's heartbreaking. It kind of does everything that Chaos and Creation does well in one song, in just one song. This song's amazing. I love when McCartney starts singing very jazzy and it's dark and moody. Probably his moodiest song since Dear Friend on Wildlife. I love that song. Spinning on an Axis is a great song. About You, probably my second favorite song on the album. A great Stonesy mid-tempo rocker. Really sexy and cool. Back in the Sunshine Again's good. Love Rinse the Raindrops, which is a full-out psychedelic rock song. Like, not even like subtly psychedelic. Like, it's a full-out psychedelic rock song, which you haven't really heard McCartney do. Really, kind of since Revolver, actually. And the rest of the album is pretty good. Like, I never skip a track. I go through it. It goes to a lot of different places. Very musically adventurous. Would say it's one of his most musically adventurous albums. It might suffer a little bit by too many tracks. Not that there's anything bad on it, but I do think if this album was a little tighter, it would make an even stronger statement. So that's like one thing keeping it from like breaking into the top 10. But a very strong number 13. I'm a big fan of Driving Rain. And you should check it out if you haven't listened to it in a while. And now we're getting into the album he recorded right before that album. This was a good period for McCartney. I like this period. And that album is Run, Devil, Run. There you go. Number 12, Run, Devil, Run. A great rock and roll album. And this is the other album I was alluding to earlier. The other album of rock and roll covers. And so much better than that Coupe CCR Russian thing, whatever that album's called. This owns that album. And it's funny because it's like 11 years later. He recorded it over a decade later. And yet the older McCartney sounds better than the middle-aged McCartney. Or the older middle-aged McCartney sounds better than the younger middle-aged McCartney. Obviously, after Linda's passing, this was a very cathartic album for him. He decided just to go back to his very first love, rock and roll, and capture essentially what the Beatles sounded like in their early years. And he nails it. He's playing with an all-star band, the likes of David Gilmour, Ian Pace, who I'm a big fan of. And this band scorches. McCartney's scorching. Some of his best vocals. And the track listing, the songs that he picks are far more interesting than the songs he picked on the other one. There are a couple of familiar big songs, but there are also a lot of deeper tracks and more obscure numbers. It's a nice balance, actually. Really nice balance between well-known and obscure songs. And the passion and performance is so strong. This is one of the greatest cover albums ever. It doesn't feel like a cover album because McCartney's inserting so much passion and power into the songs. And the title track, Run Devil Run, that is an original Paul McCartney composition, and it's a banger. It's a complete banger. You could have thrown out like with the Beatles or the White Album or any more hard rock and Beatles album, and that song would have fit right on it. And I just love this album. I still listen to it quite a bit. And it shows you that middle-aged guys could totally rock the house when they want to. And he totally captured that magic. And it has a great production. And it's just a wonderful album. And another album that I don't think people talk about enough. So check that out, especially if you're a fan of 50s rock and roll and ballsy, cathartic, passionate reworkings of those rock and roll songs. Number 11. This is an album that will probably surprise people I ranked so high. It's an album that I don't think too many people like, but at the same time, I don't hear too many people talk about it. It's one of the Forgotten Wings albums. At number 11 is London Town. I always liked London Town, but over the years, I've grown to love it. Yes, I love London Town. It's great. And okay, this is going to shock people, and I'm not just saying this to be counterculture, but from this point on, all these albums I like better than Sgt. Pepper. All right, just saying it. All these albums, and that includes London Town. I like London Town better than Sgt. Pepper. Am I saying objectively it's better than Sgt. Pepper? Hell no, that would be stupid. But subjectively, my feeling is when I play London Town, I want to keep hearing it. When I play Sgt. Pepper, I'm like, I'm good for about 3 or 4 years, you know? I don't need to hear it again. And also, I would say a couple lower tier Beatle albums along with that, like Please Please Me, Yellow Submarine Soundtrack. Yeah, I would put London Town above them too. But that's probably about it. But still, love the album on its own terms, even without comparing it to Sgt. Pepper. It's one of his most British albums. And this is the thing too, I feel this album is really the template for later, older aged McCartney kind of albums. Like, I feel like if he did an album like London Town between 2000 and like now, everyone would be hailing the lyrics, the melody, the wistful quality. This album has a very wistful quality, but yet eclectic, more eclectic than Chaos and Creation. And it's very unique. I would say the sound of this album is, it's very yacht rock, but kind of vaguely experimental yacht rock. It's like literally yacht rock. Paul and the band actually composed and rehearsed these songs on a yacht. So there, it doesn't get more yacht rock than that. And overall, it's pretty mellow, although there are a few rock and roll songs. But the music and melodies are lush. Paul's singing's great. It's still a lot of the guys from Wings, Jimmy McCulloch and Joe English, are still playing throughout most of this album. They just weren't part of the packaging and album cover because by the time they were pressing the album sleeves, they had left the band. So they had already left the band, but they did record on it. So they are on it. So it is a proper Wings album in that sense. And also, I would say this is the most Paul collaborative Denny Lane. Like, they co-wrote several songs on this album, and Linda was having a baby at the time. So I think Paul was just like on his yacht rowing down with Denny Lane, and they wrote a lot of songs, and he was really tapping into the British spirit. I would say the most since probably Ram with this album. And it feels like a very pure, true album. Even though I like Wings at the Speed of Sound and love some of those other Wings albums, which we'll be getting to, I still think they definitely sound like Paul's like grappling with the modern music scene and trying to be a big success. London Town sounds like he's just comfortable in his success now and just doing whatever the hell he wants. And as a result, he does London Town. I love the title track, wistful, beautiful song. These melodies are like Brian Wilson level melodies, really great, really beautiful. Also, Love Cafe on the Left Bank, a great kind of proto Brit pop song, both rocking and fun and poppy. Great guitar solo. Good work, Jimmy McCulloch. I just love this whole vibe of this album. I'm Carrying, a beautiful Paul McCartney ballad, really well sung. Backwards Traveler and Cufflink, a really cool, funky, kind of gonzo space song, kind of foreshadows the McCartney 2 stuff a little bit. Really like that. I've Had Enough, which is a great mid-tempo, catchy rocker. Love that song. With a Little Luck, a song kind of like Silly Love Songs, a song I did not like as a teenager. When I first got my first copy of Wings' Greatest Hits, I remember not liking this song. But now I love it. Now I think it's a beautiful, optimistic song that I feel should be the international anthem for the whole world. More people need to listen to With a Little Luck. And I love all the synth work. It's really cool. Famous Groupies, great song. Sounds a little like some of the stuff he would do on Tug of War. Very British, but I wouldn't say it's twee. This is more like darkly sardonic, kind of boozy British. And I like darkly sardonic, boozy British more than twee British, if you get the subtle difference. Deliver Your Children, the second song with children in the title, which normally would put me off. But this one's actually pretty good. Great Danny Lane song, really like it. Name and Address, great little rock and roll song. Paul's tribute to Elvis, who had just passed a few months prior. Love the song, great rock and roll song. Don't Let It Bring You Down, wonderful, moody, atmospheric Celtic ballad. Love it. And then it ends with Morse Moose and the Grey Goose, which is a really weird gonzo rock disco song, I guess. It's kind of a rock disco song, but it's just very experimental and sounds like something a bunch of drunk blokes would write on a yacht. And it's a really cool way to end the album. And yeah, so I pretty much love every track on this album. And it's a pity it didn't break my top 10, which we're getting to right now. Now we're getting to the top 10. The top 10. At number 10 is an album that I reviewed once. In fact, it was the second video I ever recorded. It was many years ago. It was real amateur hour, but for some reason, I felt compelled. Well, I know the reason, because there was just a new deluxe edition of this came out, and I decided to make a video about it. So yeah, it's kind of funny when you think about it, that the second video I ever made was about Wings Wildlife. Yes, at number 10 is Wings Wildlife. This, in my opinion, is the most underrated Paul McCartney album. A lot of people don't like this album. This is usually considered the worst Wings album, but I disagree, obviously. Now, back when I did that review, many moons ago and many beards and long hairs ago, I did this video. I said it was my second or like third favorite McCartney album. That was a little bit of madness. I think I was over praising it. And one of the reasons why is this was one of the last, I think it was the last Wings album I ever listened to. And I was avoiding it for years because there was like no hits on it. And people just always said it was really bad and that there was like some shitty reggae on it. And so it didn't sound like an album I thought I would like. But when I finally heard it, I just loved it. I would describe it as Paul's Primal Scream album. Definitely his answer to Plastic Ono Band, which is interesting because that's not even the corresponding album. Like he kind of got the order wrong. Ram would have been the answer to Imagine, and this should have been the answer to Plastic Ono Band. But, Macca, he's a quirky guy up there in Scotland playing with his lambs, working on the roof. He doesn't always get the order right. But anyway, this is the first Wings album, the first official Wings album. It's when Denny Lane finally gets involved. And it's the first lineup, kind of. It's not the full lineup yet, but it's got 4 Wings. There's 4 Wings in this band. So I might have overpraised this album for a couple years when I was first under its spell because I was expecting it to be so bad. And I thought quite the opposite. I thought it was great. But it has, over the years, since I made that video, it has kind of dropped a little bit in my estimation. Although I still love it. Obviously, I love it. And hey, like I said, from this point on, all these albums I like better than Sgt. Pepper. So yes, I like Wings Wildlife better than Sgt. Pepper. So just process that. Deal with it. Let's move on. What I love about this album is what a lot of people probably don't like about it is it's like this scrappy, off-the-cuff McCartney album. In a way, he never really did an album quite like this again, at least not with a band. I would say it's close in DNA and spirit to those DIY McCartney solo albums where he's just recording himself in his home studio. It's like one of those albums, but with a band, which gives it a very unique quality in the Macca discography. I'm not going to get too into this album since I already reviewed it. You could check out that review if you want to go back to the past, but pretty much everything I said that review holds true. Maybe I don't love it quite as much as I did back when I did that review, but I still do love it. I love the title track. That's a real rip-roaring, epic rocker, and I think my favorite's still Bip Bop, which is a cool little jazzy song. And of course, you got Dear Friend, which is a moody, haunting ballad, and Tomorrow, which is a great unsung pop rock gem from McCartney. Great album, has a real fun, off-the-cuff spirit. And if you like indie rock and things that are a little more off the beaten path, you should definitely check out Wildlife. It's better than its reputation. Number 9. Okay, now for the most part, I think I'm getting to albums that won't be controversial, all right? For the most part, these are well-received albums, just like number 9 is. A lot of people think this is one of McCartney's strongest solo albums, and guess what? I agree. Anything in the top 10 is an album I love. Number 9, Flaming Pie. I love this album. This album is great. Until 2 other albums that are on this list came out, until that happened, I thought this was the best album post Tug of War. And if you still think that, you're not necessarily wrong. There's just 2 other albums that he released afterwards that I love even more. Although it's close. This was tough. The albums I love were harder to rank than the albums I don't love. It was really tough. I was bouncing back, especially my top 2. I'll get to that when we get to the top 2. That was quite a tug of war, no pun intended, and that may or may not be a spoiler. I don't know. I'm not giving anything away. Who knows? Who knows what Edwin's up to? All I can tell you is I know what Flaming Pie is up to. It's up to being an awesome album. He co-produced this primarily with Jeff Lynne of ELO, which I'm also a fan of. Perfect collaborator and producer to work with Paul, especially since Jeff Lynne had such a strong Beatles influence in his own music. And it's a great collaboration. I'm surprised they didn't do more albums together. I really think he was a great producer to work with McCartney. And George Martin does a couple tracks too, and Ringo plays on a few tracks, just like he did on those other George Martin produced albums of the 80s. Opens up the song we were singing. This is the kind of heart on the sleeve anthem that normally I'm not a big fan of, but when it's done well, and it is done exceedingly well here, it works. This song is beautiful. It works kind of similar to the way Tug of War works on Tug of War. Like it's a beautiful, earnest, but very emotional and very heartfelt and doesn't feel fake at all. It feels like it's coming from a personal place and McCartney reflecting back on his days with the Beatles. No doubt because this was the album that was recorded after the anthology. And I do think that inspired Paul to kind of step up his game. This was an album he really needed to make after Off the Ground, in my opinion. The World Tonight, such a great mid-tempo rocker, very catchy. Hell, you could have put this right on Band on the Run. You wouldn't miss a beat. It's just a great rocker with a great riff. Love that song. If You Wanna, another song I love If You Wanna, great driving, cool rock song. Almost has a Dire Straits quality, who I'm also a fan of. So I really dig this song a lot. Flaming Pie title track, that's a great fun, mid-tempo kind of Beatle-esque stomper. Really love that song. By the way, when I do this, that's the piano. Yeah, that's Paul McCartney pounding on a piano whenever I move my hands. I'm Italian American. I don't know if you know this about me. As an Italian American, I am compelled. It's in my DNA. I'm compelled to use my hands a lot. That's why I thought I'd be good for YouTube, because YouTubers are always using their hands a lot. But whereas they're faking it, I'm not. I am genetically compelled to do it. So yeah, so when I do this, that's the piano. That's Paul McCartney rocking out on a piano, just so you know. Used to Be Bad. That's a great bluesy song, kind of soulful, a little different for him. And I really dig it a lot. Steve Miller plays on that too, which is cool. Souvenir, my favorite track on the album. Oh my God. Now this is McCartney totally slaying a soul song. Like, he gets it. He got to hear it. There's been some cases in the past where I thought he didn't quite hit it, but here, his singing's amazing. By the way, his singing is amazing throughout this album. And this song has so much passion, and it's kind of like a borderline rock soul song. And hey, it could have fit on a Beatles album. It could have been on the White Album or Abbey Road. It's that level of quality, in my opinion. And it's impressive. Like, if John Lennon was alive and he heard Souvenir, he'd be like, not bad, Paulie. I still think you're a cunt, but not bad. Really Love You, another great groove and rock song. Vaguely little psychedelic moments here and there. It gets kind of jammier than you're used to from Paul. I really love it. It's a great song. Beautiful Night, classic. It's like a modern day classic. Like, this should be played on the radio along with Hey Jude and Maybe I'm Amazed. Like, this, it's that level. I love the song. It's a beautiful melody, beautifully sung, beautifully played. Yeah, that's the piano as well. And then it rocks out at the end. I love hearing Ringo's prominent backing vocals at the end of the song. Really brings out the Beatles quality. It's great. The whole album's great. Moving on. Number 8, New. Yes, this album is entitled New, even though it is no longer new. But it was new when it came out. And not only because it was the newest album that came out, but it was Paul McCartney embracing, I would say, a more modern sounding production. It came out in, like, let's see, 13? Yep, 2013. See, I didn't even need to look at Wikipedia, but I did anyway, because that's the level of professionalism you get from me. But yeah, this came out in 2013, and he worked with a handful of younger modern producers. But the fact that he's working with multiple producers, and yet it still has a very cohesive, unified sound, is credit to Macca. Yeah, Macca's the guy, really. He's really calling the shots. And it's great. It's an amazing album. And even though I really liked it a lot when it came out, this is an album that I grew to love over the years. So even though it's now an oldish album, it still sounds very fresh and new every time I listen to it. I would say it's his most consistently catchy album post Tug of War. Every song is very memorable. The hooks, the melodies, it's eclectic, and it's everything you would want from a Macca album. Save Us is a great, powerful, emotional rocker, some pounding piano in it, which I like. Great guitar work. Alligator, that might be my favorite song on the album. I love Alligator. That's just a bona fide McCartney classic, as great as anything he did in the Beatles or Wings, in my opinion. I love that song. Nice, moody, but catchy, sneakily psychedelic. There's a lot of sneaky little psychedelic moments throughout this album, but not quite as in your face as Memory Almost Full. It's done a little more subtly, and I feel the songs are much stronger on this album. On My Way to Work, another great song, maybe my second favorite on this album. Great song, very British and catchy, and like a song you would want to sing along at a pub. I love it. Queenie Eye, great rocker and poppy and kind of dancey all at once. Any genre of music that he wants, he can do it. He's a lot like Prince that way. He could just adapt and make it his own. I love it. The title track's great. Appreciate's a cool, trippy, sexy dance song. Hosanna, a beautiful, haunting, somewhat dark ballad. I Can Bet is a really catchy, fun, poppy rocker. Road it's like everything that's on this album in one song. And Paul just fits into these different styles effortlessly. See, this is the thing, Chaos and Creation, I don't want to be trashing it because I think it's a really good album. But New has what that album didn't have, which is the different sides and the poppy side. Like, Paul is, in his heart, he really loves a good melody. He loves a good hook. He is a popsmith. And New is an album that totally leans into that and plays to it. It plays to his strengths. And also, by this point, he's writing for his voice. He's writing for his older voice here and maxing it out for all it's worth. It's like voice maxing. And it doesn't sound like it's all technology too, or auto-tune. Like it sounds very naturalistic. And I'll get more into that when we discuss the next album. But to me, he's singing exactly the way he should be singing as a man of his age, while still being open-minded to new ideas and fresh new sounds. Paul McCartney is all in. He's genuinely interested in new music. He's genuinely interested in exploring new sounds. He's never put himself in a box as just a rock and roll guy. Even going back to the White Album, there would be Helter Skelter, but then songs like Martha, My Dear. McCartney always wanted to experiment and do different things. So to me, it's very consistent with who he is as a person and as an artist. And that is why new sounds authentic. It doesn't sound like an old guy just trying to be hip with the kids. It sounds like a genius songwriter and record maker that likes being on the edge. He loves being on the edge, and that's where he wants to be. That's where he gets inspired, and that's where he creates wonderful albums like New, an album that still holds up. It holds up even better. I love it. I think it's one of his best albums, and I know a lot of fans love it too. So if you love New, hey, share your thoughts in the comments section, and let's tap fist. All right. Number 7, the last album he recorded, which I also did a review of, McCartney 3. Yes, the third part of the McCartney DIY trilogy. I'm not going to go too in-depth with this album since I already did a review of it, but obviously I have a very high opinion of it. I think this is also better than Sgt. Pepper. Go figure. McCartney 3 is called McCartney 3 because like McCartney 1 and 2, it's an album he recorded in a home studio, his home studio, and this time it was during the pandemic. That's right, during COVID, and he plays all the instruments. There's one song slide where he brought in a drummer and lead guitarist to rock it out because that song needed it. It's a balls out, catchy as hell rocker, and I love it. But everything else is all just Macca. He's playing all the instruments, no one else, self-produced, self-recorded. It's amazing. McCartney is such a great producer. I'm going to talk about this more when we get to Ram and Band on the Run, but an amazing producer, and he still has it. This album came out in 2020, and I recall this album came at a really tough time. Not only was a pandemic going on, I was going through a separation, which would eventually lead into a divorce. And it was a tough time for me. And I remember this album, and also released around the same time, AC/DC's Power Up, which I also reviewed at that time. Both these albums really came when I needed them. And they were both really strong statements from these older legacy acts that I've always been a fan of. And it was like they were the ultimate comfort albums, and they came just when I needed them. And so, yeah, McCartney 3, I always have a soft spot for it for that reason. But that aside, objectively, it is a really strong album. It's great. I love every track on it, and I still listen to it quite a bit. It's a wonderful winter album, which is when it came out, and it's capturing that because he was inspired by the pandemic. Everyone was like hibernating. And everything I said in my review, I still hold true. I will just hit really quick. I love the moody ballad, Women and Wives, as good as anything on Chaos and Creation, if not better, in my opinion. Find My Way is a great little pop song. That's the thing. We got the eclecticism here, which is something I always love. Deep, Deep Feeling, a cool, trancy, minimalistic song. It goes into that gonzo, minimalistic McCartney side that you had on Wildlife and a few times on the White Album, like Why Don't We Do It in the Road? And I love when McCartney gets like that. Also a lot of shades of McCartney 2 throughout this sliding. I already talked about that. Great rocker. Deep Down, another really cool, minimalistic, funky song. Generally funky. You want to bob your head to it and get into that groove. And it ends with Winter Bird, When Winter Comes. A beautiful, wistful ballad that is up there with McCartney's best. McCartney, like I said about the last album, here, yeah, he sings like an older man, but he's singing songs specifically designed for his voice, the way he sings now. And that's something I hope continues with the new album that's coming up, which I will touch upon at the end of this video. But to me, he's singing exactly how he should as a man his age, while not limiting himself. He's just finding new ways to explore with his voice and finding ways to make new music that still sounds fresh and relevant. And I said this then, and I think it now. I think McCartney 3 is a triumphant album. But what I like even more, at number 6, is McCartney 2, which I also reviewed. I reviewed McCartney 1 and 2. I did it back-to-back videos where it was a trilogy. One video was 1 and 2. The other video was 3. If you want to check them out, go back and check them out. I think at the time, I ranked these even higher, like Wildlife. They might have been my third or fourth favorite McCartney albums. Yeah, they dropped a little bit, but not that much. I really love these albums. I love McCartney too. I mean, I'm a sucker for the whole DIY thing. I love hearing McCartney just off the cuff, just experimenting and doing cool, weird little things by himself. He's a musical genius, and I think you get more interesting things from McCartney when he's in that state. Things like he might not do on like a more official release, if you know what I mean. And McCartney too, pretty much was his goodbye to Wings. It was him issuing in his second wave of his solo career. He was bookending it with McCartney 1 back in 1970, and now you had McCartney 2 in 1980. So it was a perfect 10-year gap. He's moving into the 80s, and he's embracing new wave and synth pop, and definitely a Devo influence, especially on Temporary Secretary, which is a banger. I love that song. Greatest Devo ripoff ever. Coming Up, which is the most famous song from it. And that's a banger for the ages too. One of my favorite McCartney songs, never gets old. It's a great opening track. I love the video. It's a lot of fun, probably his best video. And it's a standout song in his discography. But the whole album's really great. On the Way is a great bluesy number. Waterfalls, beautiful ballad. One of These Days, the last track on it, the ballad, is definitely Beatles worthy, in my opinion. One of his most beautiful and wistful and understated songs ever. And it's just like pure melody and soul. I love that song so much. And I like all the weird stuff too. I love dark room and bogey music and all that stuff. My nephew Cole, he likes 3 a little bit better than 2. He thinks it's more consistent. And maybe it is. I ranked them pretty close to each other. But I give 2 the edge because I don't mind offbeat little moments. Like, yeah, I never want to listen to Front Parlor or like Frozen Jap by themselves. But as part of the album, it's like Wild Honey Pie and songs like that on the White Album. Like, I like these offbeat moments. It's part of the character of the album. And this album has such a great character. It's such a great stoner F You to the Japanese Police album. If you're into things like Ween, the band Ween, and more experimental, quirky, offbeat music, then this is an album you should definitely check out. I'm a very, very big fan of McCartney too. And yes, I like it better than Sgt. Pepper. Moving on. At number 5 is McCartney, the album that started it all. Well, after he was already a big famous rock star because of the Beatles. Because of the goddamn Beatles. And thank God for the Beatles, because if it wasn't for the Beatles, we wouldn't have had solo Paul McCartney. Yes, this album is a masterpiece. This is the ultimate DIY album. So listen, I love All Things Must Pass. I love Plastic Ono Band, but those albums are definitely more dated. And dated is not always a bad thing, by the way, especially if they're from a time period where it was a musical renaissance and awesome time in culture and art. To be dated from that period is not necessarily a bad thing. The way I would compare this album to George and John's respective solo debuts is the same way I would compare the Basement Tapes to Sgt. Pepper. Sgt. Pepper's dated. It's definitely a 67 album. Basement Tapes? God, they could have been recorded in 67 or 1927 or last year. You know, McCartney is proto DIY indie rock. It's outside of time. In the same way that the Basement Tapes are outside of time, this album is. I love every song on it, all the little quirky moments, and there's just some amazing tracks that he's just knocking out. That Would Be Something, a great bluesy song. Every Night, I guess that probably is my second favorite song on the album. A pure melodic McCartney gem. Always love that song. Junk, likewise, a song he wrote in the Beatles. It could have been on the White Album, but he had so many great songs. A few of them had to go. Imagine when Junk is one of the songs that you have to let go. But better for it to be here, I guess. Man, We Was Lonely, a great country song by McCartney, but in that very idiosyncratic McCartney style. Oh You, great rocker. Teddy Boy, I like Teddy Boy. It's a catchy little song, and also a song he wrote in the Beatles. And of course, it has Maybe I'm Amazed, one of the greatest songs that Paul McCartney ever wrote. Obviously, Beatles level quality with this one. I prefer Maybe I'm Amazed to Hey Jude, Let It Be, definitely The Long and Winding Road. Yeah, I like it better in all those songs. I think Maybe I'm Amazed is one of the greatest ballads that Paul McCartney ever wrote. And this version specifically, I know the live Wings version done later on was actually the hit version of the song. But this version, this original McCartney version, is my favorite version of the song. It's just so powerful and passionate in the way he sings and he's screaming his head off during the chorus. I think that there's a case that this is the first true power ballad. Yeah, there were ballads before this, but this is a power ballad the way that people in my generation think of a power ballad. Like if you were like young in the late 80s or early 90s, there's all those bands, especially hair metal bands in the late 80s that all had to have a power ballad, like Home Sweet Home and all that stuff. To me, that's like the whole formula for that is here. You got the piano, remember the piano, and you got a ripping guitar solo, which Paul does. Paul plays all the instruments on this, like on the other two McCartney albums. And it's all there. He's just laying it down. He's laying down the ultimate power ballad. The whole blueprint's there. And like in most cases, the original is always the best. And it's an amazing song. And I love it. And I love this whole album. And the only reason it's not higher is because there's 4 albums that I love even more. Number 4, Venus and Mars. I always loved this album, but my love for it has only grown over the years. A perfect, eclectic rock record recorded and produced by Mr. Paul McCartney at the peak of Paul McCartney in Wings. This one was Wings. He just called it Wings because Band on the Run did so well that he could get away with just calling an album Wings again. And it's to his credit, too. He's top bloke, that Macca. He wanted it to be a real band. And this one, like Wings at the Speed of Sound, does kind of feel more like a band. Maybe not quite as much as that one, but overall, it's a stronger album. This is one of the strongest albums he ever recorded. And it is a popular one of Wings fans. I would say of Wings fans, this is generally the second most popular one. And with good reason, because it's the second best one. Yeah, McCartney's production, like Jimmy Page, not enough people talk about Paul McCartney as a producer. He was a great producer, has a great ear. Not only does he have a great ear for melody, he has a great ear as a producer. The sonics, the way the instruments are all layered, the melodies, everything, it's just top shelf music. Love the whole connecting track, Venus and Mars, moody, very mid-70s. Like you can hear everything from like Fleetwood Mac to Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. It's all going on around, and Mac is right there in the middle. He's right there in the middle, being highly competitive and successfully so. Love it. Goes into Rock Show, a great banger, really fun opening rock track, very cheeky and postmodern, very Alice Cooper or David Bowie glam rock vibe with this one. Really love it. Lovin' Song, my favorite track on the album. Another one of Macca's greatest ballads he ever wrote. I feel this would be a much bigger song if people heard it. It's kind of a deep track. People don't talk about it much, but I love this. It's majestic, atmospheric, really emotional, a high point on this great album. Magneto and Titanium Man. Even though the lyrics make it clear that Paul McCartney never actually read an X-Men comic book, he must just skim through it because this is not the characteristic of Magneto whatsoever. He just writes him like he's just some common bank robber. But anyway, put that aside, it's a great, funky, fun little song. My second favorite track, the next one, Letting Go. Oh, I love Letting Go. Why wasn't this a bigger hit? Come on, mid-70s, get with it. This song is great. A meaty, soulful, smoky, like a smoky bar kind of mid-tempo rock/soul song. McCartney totally pulls it off. I love it. I love the sound of the horns on it, the guitar, Mac is singing. Awesome song. One of his best songs. As great as anything he did in the Beatles. Love the Venus and Mars reprise. Love Spirits of Ancient Egypt, which Danny Lane sings. Great job singing. The band harmonizes, but Macca wrote this one. Great one. It's kind of a trippy, fun, a little proggish in places. I really dig it. Medicine Jar. Jimmy McCulloch strikes again. He wrote this song, co-wrote it for drummer buddy of his, and he sings it, and he does a great job. It's a great song. Nice, funky, mid-tempo rock song with a good stomp, and his singing's good. I love hearing different voices, too. That's one thing I love about the Beatles albums, and I love about a lot of 70s albums, like 70s Kiss and Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles, and even into Sonic Youth. It's something I love about Sonic Youth. I love hearing different lead singers in a band. So I think it's really cool that McCartney had these Wings guys, these Wings gentlemen singing some songs. And they're great songs. Call Me Back Again, a great, rousing, rowdy soul song where Paul's really belting it out. I love it. It's great. Even Listen to the Man Said. This is another one when I was a teenager, I thought it was a little slight. Not anymore. Now I think it's slightly ingenious. Yeah. A masterful little pop song and very idiosyncratic and offbeat and really not like anything any other human being would write except for Paul McCartney. Kind of like Let Him In. There are just some songs that are just like pure Macca pop and not like anything else anyone would have done. And this is one song like that. Treat Her Gently, Lonely Old People, a beautiful, understated ballad that ends this album on a nice and bittersweet note. And then you got a little bit of that Crossroads theme that pops up at the end, which is a nice little tag. And it's a masterful album. It's a great album. This would be most bands' best album. But Paul McCartney, and even Paul McCartney in Wings, is not most bands. Number 3. Okay, we're going to get to the top 3. The top 3. Hey, remember when I made it sound like Tug of War was either number 1 or number 2? Well, I was just messing with you because it's number 3. There you go. Number 3, Tug of War. Still very high. Yes, this is my third favorite Paul McCartney release. I always loved this album. I've always considered it one of his best albums. Definitely his best post-Wings era album, and I think most people do. It's a very highly regarded album, but my love of it has only grown over the years. It's an eclectic pop rock masterpiece. Everything I've been gushing about Paul McCartney, he does it throughout this whole album. It's a tour de force, and it's like designed to be a tour de force. It's designed to be one, and he pulls it off. This is the first album he recorded and released after John Lennon's death. Came out in 1982. He recorded it with George Martin, and Ringo plays on several tracks, and he's obviously, he knew he needed to step up and make a big statement. He needed to make a record that was a statement after John Lennon's death and show people that he still had it. He pulled it off, and pretty much everyone agreed. This was a big comeback album for him, both critically and commercially. In fact, a lot of those earlier Wings era albums that are now held in high esteem, like Ram and the first McCartney album, they were critically disdained at the time. The only album of his that I believe critics liked was Band on the Run. Band on the Run was a comeback essentially for him in the 70s, both critically and commercially. And Tug of War is essentially doing what that album did for him in the 70s, it did for him in the 80s. Of course, everyone probably knows Ebony and Ivory, the hit with Stevie Wonder. And that's the song. It's probably my least favorite song on the album, but I like it. It was kind of a song that was easy to make fun of, especially after that classic SNL skit with Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo. You could kind of never take the song seriously again after that. But it's a beautiful melody, written, by the way, all by Paul McCartney himself. Stevie Wonder did co-write the other Stevie Wonder collaboration, What's That You're Doing, which isn't a surprise because it sounds like a Stevie Wonder song. And it sounds like a good, funky Stevie Wonder song. I like it a lot. I'm a huge Stevie Wonder fan. And one day, I might review his albums, if I ever get to it. But anyway, so he's got like the 2 tracks of Stevie Wonder, but man, there's so much more in this album than just those 2 tracks. The title track, an amazing song, which I told you about earlier, a very earnest, heartfelt statement that sounds like he's singing about the world and also him and John at the same time. It's amazing. Take It Away, one of Paul's greatest songs, a really catchy, fun, has a little bit of that ska thing going on in it, and he pulls it off. It's one of his strongest melodies and hooks, and it's just like pure music and pure joy. That's the thing about this album, and it's why like the album cover is a great representation of this album, Paul with the headphones on, because it's clear that this is a music made by a man that loves music. To me, it's like perverse if you love music yourself and you don't love this album. It's so filled with melodies and hooks and interesting ideas and great lyrics, some of his strongest. The first side's great, but the second side's even better. Even better. Ballroom Dancing. I think that's my favorite track. Yeah, Ballroom Dancing. There's another one that comes close. But Ballroom Dancing, Beatles level quality. Beatles level quality. Love this song. Great rockin', rip-roaring, fun song. Paul's singing is next level. His singing is so good on this album. And he just sounds like he's pouring all his heart and soul into Ballroom Dancing. It's fun and it's joyful and it's euphoric and it's like what the Beatles were like at their best moments. The Pound is Sinking. A great, very Britishy, but the kind of Britishy I like. Dark, sardonic, talking about economic collapse, but like in a pub with a few blokes, and you're having your pints. it has the vibe of that conversation. It has a lot of character, has a lot of charm to it. Some of his best lyrics, love it. Then we got Wanderlust. That's my second favorite track. Very close second. One of Paul's greatest ballads. One of his greatest ballads. Up there with Maybe I'm Amazed and Hey Jude and For No One. A beautiful, melodic, wistful song. It's pure, bittersweet McCartney. And with the George Martin production and the horns, this would be a standout track on Sgt. Pepper. And yes, I like this album better than Sgt. Pepper. Love the little experimental thing with the vocoder he does, that voice box thing, which is all synthy and cool. Sounds like something that would be on McCartney too. And it goes right into Dress Me Up as a Robber, my third favorite track on the album. I love Dress Me Up as a Robber. Man, is that song sexy. That's a sexy damn song. For a boyish twee guy like Macca, he can really get a swerve on sometimes. This song, it's just, I don't even know how to describe it because it's a little bit of everything. It's kind of disco-y, it's kind of funky, has a little Latin rock edge, great little guitar hook there, and kind of spacey and trippy all at once. And jazzy, a little samba-like. It's all in one. And his most kinky lyrics since Lovely Rita, I love it. I mean, this sounds like something like Stereolab could have done, like in the late 90s. Stereolab should have done a cover of this song. It's really an innovative, interesting, idiosyncratic gem of a song, and I love it, and I love this album. It's an album that only gets better over the years, and if you don't love it, you hate music. I'm so sorry you hate music. The top two was tough for me. It was really tough, actually, because for many, many, many years, I've always said this one album was my favorite Paul McCartney album and my favorite solo Beatles album. In my McCartney, I think it was, my McCartney and McCartney 2 video, I cited this album and talked a bit about it and cited it as my favorite McCartney album. And a lot of my friends and people close to me in my life know how much I love this album. I'm a very big fan of this album. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. And I've only recently came to the conclusion that it is not my favorite. It's my second favorite, but it's a very strong second. I do love it. And the album I'm talking about is Ram. Yeah, Ram is now my second favorite Paul McCartney album. It's a masterpiece. And yes, this wipes the floor with Sgt. Pepper. It's not even better than Sgt. Pepper. Wipes the floor with it. Yeah, I love this album so much that I could just randomly look down and pick up like the Ram Deluxe box set. A thing of beauty. I wish I did a video about this, but I wasn't making YouTube videos back when I first bought this. Anyway, I feel bad. I feel bad that Ram is number 2, but I'm just got to be honest. It's how I feel these days. But still, I listen to this album several times a year. It's a masterpiece. And you would think I might not like this. Some of you out there are going to be like, hey, you're slagging Sgt. Pepper all the time and you don't like twee stuff. So why do you love Ram? Ram is like totally twee kind of Pepper stuff. It is and it isn't. That's the thing. For one thing, I think it's more personal. It has an intimacy and warmth that Sgt. Pepper doesn't have. I feel the production is a little more understated and subtle and sophisticated in a lot of ways, more so than Sgt. Pepper. Now, granted, you needed Sgt. Pepper first, obviously. That was a highly innovative album. But I feel like McCartney, by this point, as a producer, and now without George Martin, just by himself, had grown. He had grown a lot. And I think if you listen to the end suite on Abbey Road, I think that is a progression from Sgt. Pepper. Hell, I think Mystery Tour was a progression from Sgt. Pepper. I think that McCartney was doing much better work on that, both him and Lennon. Like I'm the Walrus and Fool on the Hill, I think are better than anything on Sgt. Pepper. So what I'm getting at is I feel that McCartney has a level of sophistication as a producer and record maker here that he didn't have on Sgt. Pepper, where he still feels kind of callow and they're still like taking a lot of advice from George Martin. So even though this is a very produced album, and yeah, the songs all go into each other like Sgt. Pepper and stuff, I feel that it's more mature. I feel that it's more intimate. I feel it's more personal. Like I said, warmer. It has this pastoral vibe that is pervasive throughout. And I just overall like more of the songs. I just think this has a stronger set of songs. So it's a masterpiece. Even John Lennon's son, Sean Lennon, has cited this album as a masterpiece. So there you go. Maybe I'm not so crazy. This was originally attributed to Paul and Linda McCartney. Yeah, it was a duo album, Paul and Linda McCartney. Although I did notice that Linda's not on the album cover. It's just Paul about to, let's say, wrestle a ram. He's going to wrestle a ram. He's just being kind of boyish. I'm not suggesting that Paul McCartney sleeps with farm animals. He just gets a little randy and rambunctious with them after he's had a few pints or smoked a J or maybe both. He's crunked and he's like, yeah, I'm going to grab a ram and maybe have, well, no, he's not going to have sex. He's not going to do it. He's not doing it. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he didn't have sex at the barn with the animals. And if he did, it was surely consensual because Paul McCartney, he's a very handsome man. I'm sure the rams and the sheeps would all love to have sex with him. Anyway, Paul McCartney's alleged bestiality aside, this is an amazing album. This is a major statement. Rolling Stone magazine hated this album. They hated this album and everything it stood for, which was music, love, real love. The funny thing is Paul McCartney was actually doing what the hippies claimed they were about. Like he went off, lived on the land, lived off the land. They were making their own food and he was like working on the roof and they had animals and he's living that life. He's living the hippie pastoral life. And I think a lot of people see that now and they recognize it. And that's one of the things, that's one of the charm of these early McCartney albums, McCartney 1, Wildlife. There's this real feeling of someone that dropped out. He's out of the rat race and he's enjoying it for all it's worth. These are albums of joy and release and emancipation. And McCartney's best qualities are reflected in this album, both as a musician and songwriter and producer, but I dare say even as a human being, with the slight suggestion of bestiality notwithstanding. Too many people, this is the anti-radical, anti-political song that angered John so much that he went off to do How Do You Sleep? Yeah, this was the one. This is the one that he called out John on. Not directly, but directly enough that John picked up what he was dropping. It's a great, catchy rock song. Beatles level song. Memorable, anthemic, great way to start off the album. Great melodies. I love Paul's vocals over the guitar line in the beginning and then it kicks in. I love it. I like Linda's backing vocals. Hey, I like some Yoko singing too. I'm very easygoing with these women that technically can't sing, but their genius husbands bring them into the band. I think it's cool. It's like how Jean-Luc Godard would bring in untraditional actors or untrained actors, and he was looking for something more off the cuff and authentic. I think Paul utilized Linda's backing vocals very well in that regard. And it's throughout this album, it does give it a charm and a quality that I think is uniquely Wings era. And I think of this album as a proto-Wings album in many ways. Dear Boy, very Britishy, but the kind of Britishy I love. I love it. You just want to be sipping some sherry in a drawing room somewhere, talking about the naughty things that aristocrats are doing. I love that song. Beautiful, beautiful melodies, like Brian Wilson level melodies and harmonizing. And it's primarily just McCartney by himself. He's doing the piano. The piano, he's hitting it. Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, that's the big hit from the album. I love it. It's very twee, but this is as great as twee can be. This is like the tweest song I could possibly like. It's not one of my favorite songs on the album, but I do love it. Every song I love on this album. It's very British and it gets boozy at the end with the whole sing-along chorus, which I love. I like when things get British boozy. Smile Away, great rocker, a lot of fun, heart of the country, nice jazzy country tune, very pastoral. I love when Paul starts doing his little jazz scats at the end. Monkberry Moon Delight, my favorite song on the album. A banger for the ages. It's like Paul's I Am the Walrus. It really is. It's a psychedelic, swirling, hard-rocking Macca tune. So unique, so original. This is Beatle Paul stepping up and giving you a Beatle quality song. This could have fit right on the White Album or Abbey Road or Mystery Tour. I love it. Great lyrics, great absurdist lyrics, great Carillion absurdist lyrics with a lot of wordplay. The whole catch-up thing is really fun, and I love it. It's a great song. Actually, this string of songs are my favorite on Ram. Monkberry Moon Delight, Eat at Home, second favorite song. This should have been released as a single. This should have been a big hit. This is like Get Back level McCartney. Like this is right up there. Get Back and Junior's Farm, a really great, catchy rock and roll song. Great hooks and melodies. Love the lyrics. A little dirty. I like when McCartney gets a little dirty. This is one that I read that Lennon liked a lot. And I could definitely hear John Lennon liking this song. and Long-Haired Lady. Long-Haired Lady, my third favorite track on this album, a masterpiece in and of itself, a masterful, pastoral, emotional, passionate song. Really like his use of Linda on this one. It goes to a lot of places. It's both kind of shamelessly dorky and romantic and folksy all at once, and with a more sophisticated and personalized psychedelia that Paul was not quite ready to master, I think, in the Beatles. He needed to master it here. Backseat of My Car, a great way to end this album. It's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece for the ages. And I can't believe it's no longer my favorite Paul McCartney album. However, yes, I had to admit, after all these years, and I like to be a little more original, but hey, sometimes the masses are right. And I decided, after years of resistance, yes, Band on the Run, I've decided, is my favorite Paul McCartney album. And objectively, it's his best album. It's objective. I think these top three are objectively his top three albums, and in the order I said. So it's both subjective and objective. But it's not just that objectively I think Band on the Run is his best album. It's the one I go back to the most. Like, when I was thinking about, if I'm honest, if I haven't listened to Paul McCartney in a while and I feel like listening to a Paul McCartney album, go to Band on the Run. That's the first one. And then I start diving into all the others. These songs aren't played out for me. Like, I could hear them again and again, and they're great. And it's not just about the big hits, not just about the title track and Jet. It's also about the deep tracks. The deep tracks are really strong. I mean, I was kind of thinking that Ram has a stronger second side, but this first side, man, is definitely stronger than Ram's first side. Whereas I feel that their second sides are competitive with one another. There's no question that this first side of Band on the Run does have an edge on Ram, which is another reason why I decided to give this the edge. This is a Beatles level run. And this is a big statement I'm about to say. Not only do I obviously like this album more than Sgt. Pepper, I would say Band on the Run these days, I like it better than every Beatles album but the White Album. The White Album's still number one for me. You're never going to top that. I don't think you could top John Lennon at his peak, which I think was on the White Album. But this might be Paul McCartney's peak. That's the thing. And I just love the sound of this album, too. It's not just the songs. I think this is Paul McCartney's greatest production, and very different from Ram, more scaled back, but yet very layered and interesting, but with less bells and whistles than Ram. And in that sense, it's a little closer to the production style of the White Album, which is probably another thing that really connects with me. Like, my favorite track on the album, Let Me Roll It. Let Me Roll It. You could have put that right on the White Album. Wouldn't bat an eye. Actually, the first time I heard Let Me Roll It was on classic rock radio, and I thought it was a Beatles song, because at the time I didn't have every Beatles album. And I was like, hey, is that a Beatles song? I don't know. It's that level of melody and hooks, one of Paul's greatest guitar hooks. I love Let Me Roll It. That is my favorite Paul McCartney song post the Beatles. I will say he had a handful of songs in the Beatles I like better, but not an entire album with the exception of the White Album. And this is up there. Let Me Roll It's a Beatles level song. There's Bluebird. I love Bluebird. I have a very fond memory of when I saw Paul McCartney on the Off the Ground tour back at when they called it Veterans Stadium. Before the Paul McCartney show, they were showing like a documentary film. That was his opening act, was his documentary film of himself. And they showed clips from his Wings era, and there was a clip of Paul singing Bluebird live. There was this big guy, this big biker-looking tough guy behind me. And when Paul was singing Bluebird, he said this, "Great fucking song." That always stayed with me. I loved it because if you looked at this guy, you would not think Bluebird would be the song that would make him go, "Great fucking song." But he was right. It is a great fucking song. Such a beautiful, beautiful melody that it makes a big, tough-looking biker guy, gives him the feels. And Beatles level, yeah, and not just because it involves a bird. It's a Beatles level melody, great song. I love Mrs. Vanderbilt. Oh my God, what a great song. Another Beatles level song, in my opinion. Love that chorus, love the groove. This is the thing too, listen to this production. It's from 1973. And God, what a big upgrade from Red Rose Speedway. After the first lineup of Wings split up, he was pissed off and frustrated. So as a result, that really inspired him. That really inspired him with this album. And this album is essentially all Paul. There's some Denny Laine contributions, a little bit of Linda with the backing vocals and a few synth lines here and there. But primarily, Paul's playing most of the instruments. He's playing all the bass, most of the guitar, and the drums. So This is really a Paul McCartney solo album with just a little bit of Danny Lane and Linda contributions. Listen to the drumming and the offbeat time signatures thrown in to Let Me Roll It. That's musical genius shit going on there. Like the Melvins did a cover of Let Me Roll It many, many decades later, and it wasn't that different. That shows you how edgy some of the stuff Paul McCartney was doing back then. And yeah, this is 1973. 1973, listen to the way the bass and drum sound, like on Mrs. Vanderbilt and a lot of the songs. Doesn't that sound a lot like Rumors era Fleetwood Mac or One of These Nights era Eagles? Even though it's like 2 years before those albums, that whole sound, that mid-70s pop rock sound, Paul McCartney is creating on this album. Rumors would not sound like Rumors without Band on the Run beforehand. And, you know, people a lot of times cite Lindsey Buckingham as a genius, as they should. But I tell you, Lindsey was taking a lot from Paul. And Band on the Run was a huge album when it came out. So, no doubt, this definitely affected and helped shape the production and sound of records in the mid and late 70s. And even though it's an acclaimed album, and a lot of people cite it as one of the best solo Beatles albums, no one really talks about how innovative the production is or how innovative Paul McCartney is as a producer. And it just sounds amazing. This record just has a perfect sound. It's one of the best produced albums ever. And the second side, Mammonia, was a song that I used to be a little on, but I've grown to love it. It's a really interesting song. One of the few songs that has a African influence, which makes sense because this album was actually recorded in Nigeria. Yeah, Paul McCartney recorded in Nigeria, which I think is another thing that added to the atmosphere. Also, I might point out, Paul was ahead of the game on the whole Africa thing, which was very trendy in the 80s. Everyone from Peter Gabriel to Paul Simon, everyone was kind of jumping on the African bandwagon. Well, Paul McCartney was doing it back in 1973. In your face. He was down there in Africa, really doing it, living it, and making music, making wonderful music. No words, probably my least favorite song on the album, but still a really good song. And man, some really nice rubber soul-esque harmonies there, harmonies between Paul and Danny Lane, and it's some really nice stuff, and it's a nice song. Hell on Wheels is sometimes included in the US version. Great single, but, you know, I don't think it needs it. Whereas, like, Red Rose Speedway could have really used High, 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 especially on that second side. This album, it doesn't need Hell on Wheels. It's fine without it. That's how great this album is. Picasso's Last Words, Drink on Me, wonderful song. One of my favorite songs on the album. A great boozy sing-along pub song about Picasso's last words. And he does bring in, this is where he does a little bit of that Sgt. Pepper stuff where he brings in the themes from prior songs like Mrs. Vanderbilt and Jet. He brings it in and it works. He does it in this kind of off the cuff, almost like you've been hanging at the pub a little too long and some of the songs are getting mixed in your head. You start feeling like it's all blending in your head because you tied one on. There's a real boozy undercurrent to a lot of Paul McCartney stuff, especially in the 70s, which I really respond to as a guy that likes to hang out at a pub, sometimes longer than he should. And this is an amazing song. And then it gets to, wow, my second favorite song on the album, and I'm happy to have this be the last song I talk about. 1985. Whoa! God damn, is that song a scorcher. One of the greatest things Paul McCartney ever wrote and recorded, in my opinion. And yes, he does some piano playing on it. Some really amazing piano playing and great singing. God, that voice, that funky Paul McCartney voice, who knew that Paul McCartney, one of the whitest guys ever, could be one of the funkiest guys ever? He sounds so funky on this song. And I love the dark, cryptic lyrics. It sounds like music from the future. And I also think Paul McCartney might have invented disco bass playing. Listen to that bass line on this song. This is 73, mind you, 73. In a few years, a lot of bassists would be doing the doop, 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 doop thing that Paul's doing on this. And the way the orchestration comes in at the end and the feeling. I love the synth. Like Linda's doing a cool, fat-ass synth sound. Hey, good job, Linda. Love that fat-ass synth sound. And the whole vibe of the song, again, kind of dark and funky at the same time. God damn, this is, again, as great as anything the Beatles did. Yes, this is top shelf Macca, throughout this whole album. And this is a great way to end it. And this is a great way to end this Macca-Rama. Yes, I'm excited about the new Paul McCartney album that's coming out crossing my fingers that Macca overpowers the worst producer of all time. Let's hope, anyway. And I will review that album. When that album comes out, I will listen to it several times in a short period of time and then record a video. So that could be thought of as an epilogue to this epic video. But I'm talked out. I'm tired. I've been talking about Macca now for hours. Feels like days. Thank you for hanging with me that long. I hope you enjoyed it. And go listen to some of these albums, especially if there's some that you haven't listened to in a while, and I said good things about them. I am Edwin Candistracci, and I am out of here.